A very good evening to one and all present here. I hope the first years have thoroughly enjoyed their morning workshop. I am Pranay Saxena, a student of Year 2 of the BDES Humanizing Technology program. And on behalf of NMIMS School of Design, I extend a warm welcome to parents, faculty, and students. I formally welcome the speaker for today, Mr. Anand S. As a part of the rollout of the new academic year, NMIMS School of Design conducts a week-long orientation program titled DFutura, the future of design. This time, the program is conducted online for the fifth batch of BDES Humanizing Technology. DFutura stands for the futuristic view of design, showcasing its transitory, collaborative, and technology-driven nature. The program consists of speaker sessions and workshops that hope to inspire the students as well as open a window to their 4-year journey at the school. We continue with the Get Inspired Talk series as a part of the DFutura orientation program. Since this is a virtual event, we request you to mute your microphones and close your videos. However, questions are most welcome. During the course of the presentation, please type your questions in the chat section. We will be taking them at the end of the presentation. The more you question, the more you explore. Without much ado, let me introduce Mr. Anand S. Anand sir is a co-founder of Gramener, a data science company. He leads a team that automates insights from data and narrates these as visual data stories. He is recognized as one of India's top 10 data scientists and is a regular TEDx speaker. Anand sir is a gold medalist at IIM Bangalore and an alumnus of IIT Madras, London Business School, IBM, Infosys, Lehman Brothers, and BCG. More importantly, he has hand transcribed every Calvin and Hobbes comic strip ever and dreams of watching every film on the IMDb Top 250. Today, Anand Sir will talk about data-driven infographics. Looking forward to an engaging session. Anand Sir, the virtual stage is yours.
Okay, thank you. Just want to check if I'm audible and clearly audible, or would you like me to do something about my volume?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Okay, thank you, folks. Well, I am going to talk about data-driven infographics, but honestly, we don't really need to restrict ourselves to just that. We can talk about practically anything. And I'd like to, in fact, keep it a bit interactive. So from that perspective, if you have any questions or comments along the way, just put them in the chat window. Does everyone have access to the chat window? Pranay, maybe you could help.
Yes, sir. Everyone has access to the chat window, and the messages they sent will be visible to everyone on the chat.
Perfect, great.
So, when you wish to take a session, then we can read them out.
Yeah, and let's keep it interactive as well. But I am going to show you some stuff, and I'm going to do that by way of introduction. So, and I mentioned about, well, stuff that I'm proud of. But one of the strangest things is that somebody like me even gets to give a talk at a school of design on design. The reason that's weird is something that I'll have to go back in history for. So 1984, my mother was in the kitchen. I was, well, there, this age, standing next to her, and I was curious. I said, "Amma, who's the most famous man in the world?" Now, I was expecting the name of a scientist, and I figured, yeah, I've got to figure out the kind of scientist I want to emulate. Her answer kind of surprised me. She thought for a while and said, I think the most famous man in the world is Walt Disney. Fair enough. Well, to be fair, I didn't at that point know that there was a person called Walt Disney. I'd seen Disney's cartoons, I'd read Disney's books, I knew the characters, but I didn't really know that there was a person called Disney, that there was a company called Disney. So I, over the years, made it my life's mission to just get to the point where I can eventually be someone who draws animations, who can, design. So I practiced several years, 6 years. And by the time I got to college, this is roughly how well I could draw. So one thing was clear to me: I can't design worth shit. There's just no way I'm ever going to be any good in the artistic field. I happen to be a really good programmer. Okay, that's my calling in life. Art, design, I I just suck at it. But see, the good part is there could be a trade-off. So my career gently evolved around making use of other people's work. So what if I can't draw anything? Let's start using other people's work. And I developed an interest in Calvin and Hobbes in particular, and I've always wanted to use the exact right Calvin and Hobbes quote for pretty much any life scenario. For example, there was this time when Hobbes asks Calvin, "Look, have you figured out any ideas for your story yet?" Calvin says, "No, I'm waiting for inspiration." You just can't turn on creativity like a faucet, right? You have to be in the right mode. So Hobbes asks, "What mood is that?" Last minute panic. This is how I do work. Wait until the last minute, get panicky, and just get the job done somehow. Now, the thing is, this strip, which I really love, I wouldn't be able to find it just at that point when I have to find it, right? I downloaded the entire Calvin and Hobbes collection, but how do you even search through it? There isn't an online search. There wasn't and isn't an online search. So I did what to me was the most logical thing, which is sit and type it out. So I put together this Excel sheet, which goes through my collection. And every time I change the row, so the way it worked was I filled in all the file names, and as I scroll through it, it would show me the row. And I type in the quote here. So long, Pop, I'm off to check my tiger trap, blah, blah, blah. And I type the whole thing and then go on to the next one and type the next and so on. 2001 to 2007. Eventually, where this led to was a little search engine that I put together. Let me show you that. So this is my Calvin and Hobbes search engine, which will eventually load. So now if I can look for last minute panic, yeah, that's pretty easy to find. Or if I want to locate that Tracer Bullet comic, yeah, okay, fine. Now I have Tracer Bullet and I can go through each one of the strips that are related to Tracer Bullet, the previous one, the next one, and so on. Or if, what about that one with Spaceman Spiff? Again, go through all the Spaceman Spiff comics and see which one I want to pull out. It worked pretty well. In fact, it was there was a point when it was on the front page of Slashdot and Reddit and Hacker News right within, I mean, I think probably 1 week, within a span of 1 week. The trouble, though, is that it got so famous that the Ucomics team sent me a legal notice, a Digital Millennium Copyright Act notice, saying, "Boss, take this down." It was a very nicely worded copyright notice, but the first copyright notice that I received, it said, "You're basically stealing images from Ucomics. So you can either see us in court, or if you take down the site immediately and promise not to do this again, then we'll go light on you." So yeah, I had an easy choice there. I shut down the site instantly, took it off, and made sure that I have access to it, but didn't really go public with it anymore. But see, here's the thing. Like I said, I'm not a designer. I don't know anything about design. What I am is a programmer. And I like design. So I went around reading what I could about design, picked up Robin Williams, the non-designer's design book, learned what I could. One area started interesting me, which is the realm of infographics. It's kind of an intersection between information communication, which I anyway do with presentations, and on the other hand, with design, which I aspire to but don't really know much about. There's one particular field within that called data portraits, which started looking pretty interesting. Let me give you a feel for that. Yeah, let's actually take one of these. So there was a TED talk by Georgia Lupi. And this TED talk talks about how you can use personal data to create a data portrait. What's a data portrait? Well, she says, look, take a few simple questions like, how old are you? And on the right side of a paper, make as many dots as you are old, 1 dot for each year. Where are you from? Depending on the continent that you're from, draw a thick bar on the right side of the paper. And so in my case, I'm from Asia, so I draw a gray bar. Next to that, draw another one, which indicates where you live. So I was born in Africa, so 1 gray bar, and Asia, and I live in Asia, so that's another gray bar for me. Are you an optimist or a pessimist? Your glass is half full, draw this kind of a triangle. Your glass is half empty, draw this kind of a triangle. Are you a morning person or a night owl? Pick from these options, and so on. So let's actually do this. So the thing is, doing this on paper and pen for me is boring. Okay, like I said, I can't draw, but I can program. So what I did instead was created this data portrait, which lets me choose my age bucket. So I am pretty old. That's not the number of dots exactly. It's just an approximation, but close enough. I was born in Asia. I live in Asia. My glass is absolutely half full. And I am very much a morning person. I have never sung in the bathroom. I'm hard to say, but I'm probably more of a cat person. And yeah, there was a time when we had 13 cats in our house, just at one point. I use an iPhone, and my phone is not in bed, not even within arm's reach, but it's in the same room, but slightly further away. Between a pencil and a pen, I actually prefer a pen. Am I an introvert or an extrovert? I don't know. So it's a pity that there isn't an option for one or the other, but on the margin, I'd probably say I'm an introvert. How many friends would I take with me on a vacation? 1 to 3, not more than that. And if I find $100, I'll save it. I'm not going to spend it or give it away. So that's my data portrait. Now, this is a random picture, right? And it varies for each one of you. But it's an imprint. It's the kind of thing that characterizes who we are. And what is the purpose? Well, I don't know, but it's fun. It's fun to do. Another one that a team made, and they put together a pretty good explanation from Georgia Lupi, which says, we're ready to question the impersonality of a merely technical approach to data. And to begin, designing ways to connect numbers to what they really stand for: knowledge, behaviors, and people. This is part of a theme called data humanism, taking the impersonality out of design and representing data for what things stand for. This actually reverses a trend in data visualization. Actually, let's do a quick check. How many, I've got to stop sharing my screen for this, do I? Or can I still see? Okay, yeah, let's do a quick show of hands. I hope you will be able to use the reactions to select raise your hand. But how many of you have heard of Edward Tufte? If you've heard of Edward Tufte, and I'll put in the spelling in the chat window, please raise your virtual hand by clicking on reactions and selecting raise hand. Okay, got you, Manisha. So one person. Anyone else has heard of Edward Tufte? Okay, thanks, Manisha. You could lower your hand. Uh, Generally, the wise assumption is to assume that the remaining 80 of you haven't heard of uh, Edward Tufte, but there is a third assumption, which is that all of you are doing whatever else you're doing. When I get into a conference or a webinar like this, I'm usually playing Minecraft on the side. So let's do a quick check. How many of you have not heard of Edward Tufte? If you have not heard of Edward Tufte, then click on reactions and select raise hand. Okay, so about a third of you have raised hands. Okay, it's about 30 odd people. Good, fine. So now I'm clear that there's about 50 of you that aren't listening to me. The 30 of you that are listening, good to know that I have an audience, and you can now lower your hands. Thank you for raising it. So Edward Tufte is one of those people who started the whole revolution around data visualization. And one of the things he focused on was data minimalism. Get the data down to the barest minimum. So in some ways, he was anti-infographics. I'm not going to go into that movement because, well, what I am going to talk about is the exact opposite of that movement. Let me share my screen again. So she has been creating a whole series of these data portraits or themes around these. So here's another one where you can pick your name, and based on the letters in your name and the length of your name, choose the shape and the color. So for example, A would be on the left extreme, Z would be on the right extreme. So my name is Anand. So that goes from A to N to A to N to D. And the color is based on the length of my name. So if I put in a longer name, then it would gently go to a different shade. So mine's a pretty short, well, first name at least. Even if you included my surname, it's pretty small. And then our interests. Are we interested in arts, politics, science, and literature? And how interested are we? So my interest in the arts is medium, but if it were really high, then, okay, wait, where is this? Okay, at the bottom. So the level of interest determines the shape of the polygon. So if I'm not at all interested, there's nothing. If I'm only one interested, it's a small circle. Level 2, a line, triangle, etc. So you get to see the degree of interest as the roundness of the polygons. Moderately interested in arts, very interested in science, couldn't care less about politics, and am moderately interested in literature. So that's my profile at the bottom. How many unread emails do I have in my inbox? Yeah, maybe about 10. But if I had none or more, then the right side would change a bit. Do I enjoy vibrant social events? Absolutely not. I'm a stay at home, and given a choice, I'd rather not be anywhere. How many times did I tweet today? Just once. And that was once in like almost for eternity. So that is my data portrait, which I could download and create a version of. This, in fact, we used at an event to, well, effectively as an alternative to name tags. Can we use a person's profile to communicate who they are and use that like a badge of sorts? What uses it? None, maybe, maybe not. And I'll come to the use part of it, how this kind of a thing started making sense to us pretty soon. But before that, let me pause. I've been monologuing for about 20 minutes now. I'd love to hear what you are taking away from what we've covered so far in these 15, 20 minutes. What ideas are you getting? What thoughts come to you? And feel free to unmute yourself. Feel free to put that in the chat window or raise your hand and maybe someone can unmute you.
You can either place your comments in the chat box, or you can unmute yourself and speak to them.
Yeah. By the way, I
In the
must tell you
meanwhile,
that
yes,
no,
sir.
go on, Pranay, go on, go on.
Yes, sir. In the meanwhile, I had some pretty interesting things that I found here. Uh, this is the first time for me I'm seeing such a creative representation of your own personality, of your own profile, which is something I find really interesting. And I was really intrigued by the fact, by the statement that you said of the removing the personality out of removing the impersonality out of data, and how data should now connect to knowledge, behavior, and people. These are a
It's a
few things I found really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, data can be fun. Why not make it fun? That's a pretty critical theme. What about others? Let's hear someone. And while you're taking your time, I must, okay, there's a comment from Partha. Okay. Data can be simplified and converted into a visual format. Yeah, absolutely. And the idea of a data portrait being different for everyone. Yes, Medini. It's sort of like a fingerprint, right? Have you folks heard of NFTs, non-fungible tokens? Check it out. I don't really understand what they are, okay? But they have something to do with blockchain and they have something to do with data art. And I haven't figured out much more than that. But in some sense, it's kind of like saying it's not just your data portrait being different from everyone. It's like your money being different from everyone. You literally invest in a blockchain token that has certain value, and that is unique as well and becomes art. JSL says, is there any access anymore to your Calvin and Hobbes database? Well, not if I want to get sued. So, but yes, there is. So ping me separately and I'll share that with you. Uh, thanks, Aishi. Yeah, the Calvin and Hobbes search engine was such a brilliant idea that I actually went back to uComics and said, look, fine that you guys sued me. I've anyway typed it out. I would like to give this to you. I'd also like to even implement this for you for free on your website. What do you say? No response. Their site still doesn't have a search engine, which is a pity. Well, let's continue exploring. And just keep putting in your questions and comments in the chat window, and we'll pick them up as we talk more. So, what I'm going to do now is talk about how this kind of a thing could be used in practice, or how you could go about creating something like this. Right? Let's specifically do that. So this particular site, which is at grammarly.com/data imprint, and I'll put that in the chat window if I can. How do I get to the Alt H is the shortcut key, is it? Okay, yeah, there you go. At data imprint, and the other one is at dataportrait.glitch.me. So these are a couple of these. The first one was made using a JavaScript library called joy.js. And I haven't really looked at this in detail. One of my colleagues built this particular website, but she used joy.js. She has some understanding of programming and enough to be able to do this kind of a thing, which actually leads me to question. Let me just stop sharing my screen for a second. Those of you who can program in any programming language, could you raise your virtual hand? Go to reactions and select raise hand. I'm just curious to see how many can program in any programming language. Got 3 hands so far, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Okay, about 11 of the 30 odd that are listening. Got you. That's about a third. That's not bad at all. I suspect you'll find, yeah, thanks. You can lower your hands, please. You'll find that programming can be pretty powerful. Generative art is becoming a thing of the future, and many of the things that you can't do manually, you'll start being able to do programmatically. This is a simple example using joy.js. where you can put together an application that does the following, where you can change the color, for example, to anything else, and decide whether you want to start at 0 degrees or whatever, how many degrees you want to turn by to start with, how many times you want to repeat that step, the following steps, and how much forward you want to move each step. So basically repeat 84 times, move forward 299 steps, then turn 144 degrees. That creates a pentagon. If instead I change this to 90 degrees, that creates a rectangle, which I may not even want to turn for. Or if I chose 120 degrees, then that creates a triangle. 60 degrees creates a hexagon. And I can tweak this a little bit. What happens if I turn 91 degrees? Weird shape, like a spirograph, for those of you who've seen it. You can keep playing around with it and create a variety of very different kinds of designs. Here's another kind of turtle graphics where you can generate a spiral of varying sizes, tweak the parameters in different ways, explore different kinds of brushes. Another one is where you can generate, well, a flower. No idea how he does it, but this is a rotation, turn. Okay, multiple degrees. Here's where he draws a flower patch, which I can make bigger or smaller and change the curve structure in a variety of different ways. Sometimes you don't even know what you're going to get out of this as you keep playing around. Incidentally, this is not the only kind of generative art. This is based on what's called turtle graphics, where you're kind of being declarative. There are some really, really powerful kinds of generative arts, and well, non-fungible tokens are one such, but I'll talk about fractals as well in a short while, where data and maths and logic can come up with designs that are pretty powerful. So I repeat, those of you who can program, you've got an edge. Those of you who specifically know JavaScript, you've got an edge. Those of you who don't, but are interested in this sort of a thing, learn JavaScript. It's actually pretty straightforward. You can create some amazing things. All of the stuff that I'm showing you was created using JavaScript, including this. So we built our own library that does a simple mapping where you can take any kind of SVG and map to a shape. So how does one do this without programming though? Is that even possible? Well, yeah, why not? See, here's the thing. Many of these can be based on a simple principle where you pick a shape. A shape can have a series of attributes, like its color, like its text, like its size, like whether it has an outline and what color the outline is. These are all attributes of a shape. Now, it's possible to map the attributes of a shape to data, and that is what creates data-driven infographics. So, for example, let me show you a little tool that we built. Okay, so let me show you an example here. I'm going to okay. I'm going to draw a shape. Let's actually I find it easier to draw shapes in PowerPoint. So let's draw some weird shape. By now you hopefully know that I can't draw very well. So let's take that and paste that shape here. Now each shape can be given a name, and that is somewhere in home, find and select, yeah, selection pane. That's what gives us this. So I'm going to call this, I don't know, with a lot of imagination, this looks like a duck to me. So I'm going to say duck. And in Excel itself, with a little bit of Visual Basic, which I coded into this sheet, and I'll share this with you. You can start filling in text, like you can say for the shape named duck, I want the shape fill to be, I don't know, 0. That makes it black, because out here, let's actually choose a color scheme. So I want to say anything that's has a value of 0 is in light gray. Anything that has a value of up to 50, that's going to be in a shade of red. And anything that's higher, let's say up to 100, that's going to be in blue. So with that color scheme, if I set the duck's color to, let's say, a 40, let's make that a number. So that's somewhere with 0 is now gray, 50 is orange, 100 is blue, 75 is between those. Actually, these colors don't look too good. So let's make them a red, yellow, green color scale. Traffic lights, red, yellow, and green. Not exactly the best color palette, but then big deal. So yeah, that's red, 50 is yellow, and 100, let's say 75. 75 is between yellow and green. 60 is even closer to yellow, 55 is even closer to yellow, 53 is even closer to yellow, slightly greenish, 45 is orangish, 40 is even more red, 30 is kind of in between, and so on. So now I can start controlling the color of this duck based on a number. So you could say that, let's say we have, what's a good example? Well, let's literally use the duck temperature. So I can put in a text. Let's get rid of all of these. So I could create an infographic that says, what's your pet's temperature? What's your pet's temperature? And make it bigger, let's say 40, and obviously we've got to center it, otherwise it doesn't look nice. And we'll actually put in the temperature out here. So degrees, and make that a bit bigger as well, something like that. And if the pet is, well, 30 degrees, okay, let's see, 30, 40, 50, that 30 degrees, your pet is feeling pretty cold, so make that blue. If it's 40, well, I don't know, let's assume that pets have the same temperature as we do. And if they are, well, even 45 degrees, then they're feeling pretty warm, so make that red. And now we can say the pet is, well, has 40 degrees, has a mild temperature. 45 degrees, strong temperature, definitely serious temperature. 37 degrees, yeah, pet is normal. And maybe I could even insert a slider rather than me having to type these numbers. So go to the developer tab, and there's an insert slider, which I can use to create a slider of sorts like this. And the cool thing about a slider is that we can set it to track a cell. So link it to this particular cell and say that the temperature can range from a minimum of 30 to 45. And yeah, now if I move the slider itself, so as I, okay. Oh, I've got to put this onto a different sheet. Fine, this number changes. I've got to do a little bit of jugglery, but actually, let me do that. No, I can't do that jugglery here, but I should be able to do that on another sheet. I'll show you the slider bit later. But with a little bit of tweaking around, what I can do is as I move this, it should be able to change the temperature of the duck, literally as I change it. Now, what use is this? What can we do? Well, in real life, this kind of a thing can be pretty powerful. So I'm going to show you something that we built in real life. So Harrods is one of the largest and certainly the most famous store in London. It's pretty much a tourist attraction. And it has a whole series of these sections in the ground floor. So if we want to see how many people are there in the floor at any point, starting at, let's say, 11 a.m. So not much crowd at 11 a.m. The crowd starts building up a little more now. And now we still have we have a reasonable number of people, but not too many people going into the central food section, probably because it's not lunch yet. I don't know. And now it starts filling out. Chocolate section is still pretty free. The bakery section is still pretty free, but beauty hall, food halls getting filled up at 2 p.m. Now, even more of a crowd. We have many more people coming in, and then it thins down a little bit, gets back up, and we can start looking at a particular section as well. So say, let's take the Chanel section. Supposing there's an assistant waiting at Chanel, and she needs to figure out when to take a break, right? So at, let's say it's her lunch break, and she wants to see if she can take a lunch break at, let's pick a time, 12 noon. Well, 12 noon, Chanel is pretty busy. At 12:30, not so great. One even more busy. Chanel at 1:30 is even busier. 2 p.m. even busier. Now it's gently starting to reduce. 3 p.m. 3:30 p.m. Yeah, looks like it's time she could go out for a break. 4 p.m. Yeah. So there pretty much needs to be a cover all the way up to 4 p.m. And at 4 p.m., the assistant in the Chanel floor can take a break. That's an example of how they could look at it. And you could also see when the crowd in Chanel reduces, does it increase in Dior or does it reduce in Dior? How about Gucci, Prada? And all of this is done in Excel. But the thing is, it's using the same principle that we laid out in these data portraits. There are shapes. Each shape has an attribute. That attribute could be as simple as the shape fill. So let's take beauty halls 5. I can change the shape fill or take one of these. So for the duck, I can change the shape fill, or I can change the text to something, and that text comes in here, or I can change the shape outline to, depending on the temperature, change the outline itself, or I can change the font size basically. Let's say I can make that 20, 30, 40. I can change the font itself. I could make that Calibri, which is what I think it currently is, or I could make that Times New Roman, or I could make that Courier New, and so on. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things, and I could change the text fill as well to, let's say, a red. So what we are doing here is linking a data point. Ultimately, any number, text, whatever, any value is data. And we are linking that to a shape. And once we have the ability to do something like that, we can effectively take data, which is in each section in Harrods, at each time, how many people do we have, and start rendering it visually. Now, this generally is the realm of data visualization. But data visualization to most people actually represents something like a chart. So people would put a bar chart saying across different departments, here's the population. It doesn't have to be. If you follow the principles that Georgia is talking about, let us de-impersonalize data. And let us actually, if we are talking about a floor, about Harrods, show Harrods and show the representation there. If you're talking about a manufacturing plant, if you want to get really dull, right, then show the plant. Actually show the layout and show people what's happening there. And as things move, help them understand where the process is currently. So the reactor is processing this, the reactor has such and such a temperature, and this could be depicted better as well, maybe literally with a thermometer. And then from there, eventually it's going to move on to a crystallizer, and we'll give it some time. It's going to take its own sweet time to finish the process. But yeah, now it's moved to the crystallizer, and eventually it'll move to the filters and so on. So thought somebody said something, though I couldn't understand it. Come back to you. But I am going to take a quick pause here and briefly summarize what we spoke about and throw it open for comments and questions. The two things that I want to share from what we covered in this portion are, number one, you can map data to visual attributes. And that process of mapping is where your creativity comes in. That's where you define the rules. But once you've defined the rules, anything is possible. Second, it helps to use some tools for this. Doing it manually, yeah, sure, you guys can. I can't. But if you could use a tool, perhaps with a programming language, but perhaps even something like Excel, then your job becomes much easier. Over to you. What ideas strike you and what questions do you have? Feel free to put those on the chat window. Feel free to unmute yourself and share.
Thank you so much, sir, for the peek into data-driven infographics. We can now proceed to the Q&A session. If there are any comments, ideas, or questions that you wish to share, please put them in the chat box. We'll be reading them one by one.
So technically, I haven't finished. This was just a midway break, but yeah.
All right.
The record for the longest silence I've had in a talk is held by NID Bangalore. I timed it 2 minutes and 15 seconds. Pin drop silence after I'd asked a question and given a talk. So let's see if you guys beat that. Any ideas that come up? What comes to your mind when you see this? Any questions that come up? JSON, where the Excel visuals done using macros, external plugins, or something else. They were done using macros, JSON. I'll quickly show you what the macro broadly looks like, and I am going to share the link to that sheet so you can download it and use it as well. That I should have it somewhere. Yeah, here it is. So you should be able to download the same sheet that I'm using once I put it in the chat window, which I'm just doing now. So from Google Drive, you'll be able to download the sheet, and then this is very work in progress. Okay, I just put something together quick and dirty. And over time, I plan to refine it. But the way it works is through macros. So here's what the macro looks like. It's not long, it's less than a page. And basically it says if any part of the worksheet has changed, then if it's changed in one particular column, then figure out what the color of the value is, if relevant. If I change the shape fill, change the shape fill. If I change the shape outline, change the shape outline. If I change the text fill, change the text fill, blah, blah, blah. That's broadly what it does. Do you need to know macros to create something like this? Yes. Do you need to know macros to use something like this? No, just download my sheet and use it, or get somebody to create one for you. Are you into Excel macros, Jason? Or anyone else for that matter? Just unmute yourself, feel free.
I'm generally into creative coding, so all sorts of coding I have sort of touched once in a while.
Got you. Well, in that case, you'll and whoever is into creative coding, you'll probably enjoy some of the work that our Story Labs team does. I'll just ping you the link here. What I'm showing is a subset of the work that that team has been working on. So this may be of interest. I'm going to play Minecraft for a while. If there are any questions, I'll wait. Okay, but I'm not going to let you guys go. Of course, half of you are anyway not here, but I don't know if I'm boring you more or you're boring me more. This is almost a contest. कुछ तो बोलो यार. And not you, Pranay.
Yes, sir. I guess we have a question from
Yeah.
Manisha ma'am.
Can you visualize the silence, pause in sessions?
That was meant to be maybe an icebreaker or on the joyful side, not a question.
Well,
But that's interesting if we can.
We can just pass the recording.
Actually, that's a thought. That's pretty easy. Ultimately, you can just get the decibel levels very easily. In fact, come to think of it, that's exactly what a spectrograph is, right?
Yeah, you can just put the recording into Audacity and look at the visual. You're done.
Yeah, no, I mean live. That when and this happens a lot when you are in this webinar and you're talking and you want a reaction and nothing happens. We don't know whether people are listening to you, and if it happens live, it's really good and visible to both parties.
Isn't that what a stereo systems equalizer does at some level? It effectively shows a noise, and if it had a little bit of history, that effectively is almost exactly what we're looking for. So does it suddenly dip? And I guess playing it at high speed would also be a useful way of looking at it. And the silence resumes. Partha, if you wanted to start learning programming, where could you start? Free Code Camp is a pretty good site to start learning programming. The website is freecodecamp.org, and I've just put that in the chat window. It's mostly for front-end technologies, which is the kind of technology that is relevant for this kind of work. It's obviously free. It says Free Code Camp. Okay, let me go to the third part of my talk. And this is going to be about 15 minutes or so. But after which, don't put me to sleep during the Q&A session. Help me out. So let me share my screen again. And 2011, I co-founded the company that I did, which is Gramner. And our design team around 2015 grew. And they got interested in comics as well. So what you see in the background here is a real wall on which there is this board. And this is the wall that they painted. And if you notice, there are a couple of characters here that are called D and Day. And they said, what we want to do is really make a whole series of comic-based data explanations out of these. So one of the things that they created was this little comic strip where D asks, oh, I have a lot of data. What should I use to analyze it? Hadoop, Scala, sorry, Day asks that. And D says, how big is your data? Day says, oh, 10,000 rows. It's almost 3 megabytes, massive. And D gives him a huge kick and says, just use Excel. 10,000 rows is just tiny. So Ramya was the person who created these. She sketched these out, did a little bit of animation entirely manually, and it was really powerful. And she was doing this again and again with the same characters. So now I can't draw, but she can. And another one of my colleagues, Richie, who was leading our story labs, he said, Anand, what does it take to start automating some of this? So we did. We put together this library called Comic Gen, which actually you can just search on Google for. But what it has is you can pick your character, such as D. There's also a version with color. You can choose which angle D is in. You can choose what D's emotion is. You can choose what pose D has. Choose to change the color of her shirt, which is, okay, that's a terrible color, all terrible colors. Choose to change the color of her face. And you have a character, which you can either download or actually link to. So this link is a web-based API that you can embed anywhere. So where can we embed? Well, It turns out that you could embed this even in Google Sheets. So if I go to sheets.google.com and created a new sheet called, I don't know, let's call it comics, well, data comics. So in any cell, which I can choose to make as large or as small as I want, I can use a formula called equal to image and put in a URL. A URL is basically a web page, which I just pasted. And yeah, that just inserts the character there, which is kind of cool. Now, what I could do is, because this is constructed using formulas, and here I have the emotion smile, right? I could make a simple scenario where, let's say, D is standing straight. And if the news is good, she's smiling. If the news is bad, she's sad. And the emotion just toggles between smile and sad. How could we do that? Well, let's copy this link and edit out here. So that's going to reload and fetch that image. What we could do now is the emotion I could put out here as happy or sad. I'll change it in a few seconds. Let's center this a bit so it looks cleaner. And the formula here could come, instead of the emotion being literally sad, it can be from this particular cell. I'm using Excel formulas here. And now, oh, sorry, it's not happy, it's smile. Yeah, now D is smiling and now D is sad. Smile, sad. So now, at least for a comic character on Google Sheets, I don't need any macros. I can just use a third-party image to create this. We can go a step further. So let's take the same pet example, pet's temperature. Now, if, and we'll make this a bit bigger. So D would be sad if the pet's temperature, let's say, is high, let's say 45 degrees. So I'll say, if the pet temperature is greater than 37, then the emotion should be sad. Otherwise, the emotion should be smile. So D fills in her pet's temperature every day: 38, sad; 36, happy; 32, happy; 40, sad. And we start now communicating data with human emotions as well. So what we have here is effectively what's called an API, an application programming interface. But think of it as just the link will control the character. Now, what can you do with this? Well, here's one example that our team put together. They said, let's take the speed of 5G in various cities. Let's zoom in a bit into this and sort it based on the speed. So you can put together a small little data story that says Jeonju residents are enjoying a speed of almost half a gigabyte per second. And this character is really shocked. Riyadh, Dublin, and Tokyo are the only 3 capital cities in the top 10. Interesting fact. And his expression matches that. And this is more like the kind of an expression where Calgary is the only North American city in the top 10. In these cases, these images are a function of the data, meaning if the data changes, the content and the text are also going to change. The underlying data is here and the story changes based on the data. To give you a feel for how that works, right, let me show you another simpler data story. So let's say that this is for a call center. And in a call center, we want to explain whether a person is doing good in terms of the number of tickets. So the calibration that we want to use is, if there are only 0 tickets that they processed, then we say, well, look, not only, but maybe let's say under 40 tickets. Uh-oh, we've got to get some fresh ideas. E6, I don't know why it says 40. I see. Okay. Oh, sorry. Fine. No, so this is actually based on a formula. So depending on whether the number of tickets is 0, 20, 40, 60, 80, etc., we have different messages that come up. So let's say the message is, I've got only 0 tickets. We need some fresh idea, folks. 20 tickets. The character has a different expression. For 20, the expression is shocked and hands folded. For 40, the expression is cunning. So let's go to 40. Yeah, I guess we can do better. 60, slightly happier. 80 and above, the person will presumably be thrilled. And that's the kind of thing that we're using to link the data back into the imagery, except that here the imagery happens to be comic characters. So that's another kind of data-driven infographic. The infographic doesn't have to be abstract like what you saw in the data imprints. They can be highly humanized, literally people's emotions and expressions. In fact, there was, let's see, faces. Here's a way in which the expressions can, in fact, be continuous. We can have faces of different sizes. We can have mouths with varying shapes. We can have brows with varying angles. And just by, and of course, changing the color. And these can express a very different set of emotions. So for example, fat face, rich, poor, happy, sad, angry, not angry. This kind of a thing was used in a 1970s publication in the LA Times called Life in Los Angeles, where they took metrics such as affluence. High affluence, basically rich people, round faces. Thin faces for those less affluent. Unemployment rate. Smiling means they're employed. Unemployed, sad faces. Stress level based on the eyebrow. So narrowed eyebrows, high stress. Broader eyebrows, less stressed. And population demographics. African population, dark. Caucasian population, light. And you can quickly see that this is an area where there's high stress, low employment, mostly African. This is a very affluent area. This is an area that's affluent and employed, but stress levels are still high. And as you go towards the east, it tends to get less and less affluent. As you tend to go south, it tends to get more and more African. So at a glance, just by looking at the faces, you can interpret what exactly is happening here. That's another way in which you can start linking data to infographics. What I want you to take away from all of this is, if there's one message that I want to leave you with, it is that design can come from data as well. And when that happens, you are effectively throwing open doors to a new kind of serendipity, where you are not the author. The author is outside of you. You are merely sort of like a game designer. You create the rules, but what comes out is not in your hands, and it's a function of the environment. That goes beyond you creating art. It goes to the realm of you enabling art. And when you are an enabler, that's a hell of a lot more powerful a force. Even personally, you may find that there are many ideas that come to you simply because you've played around with a structure that you've created and said, that's really odd. I didn't think that could be possible. I'm going to leave you with one last anecdote of what happened as a result of all of this work. See, we built this library, ComicGen, and we published it. So we started also using this as part of our projects. One of our clients is Star TV, and we built a data infographic for them, which used Comic Gen, and that was used as part of their marketing team's analysis. A few years ago, Star TV was acquired by 21st Century Fox, and in 2019, 21st Century Fox was acquired by Disney. So suddenly in 2019, I was actually drawing comics for Disney because my comic library is being used as part of their team. Childhood dream that I had fulfilled, even though I'm a programmer and can't draw worth shit. With that, I just hope you have some idea of the kind of serendipity and the power that data can introduce into your art. Okay. Best of luck, and I'd love to throw it open for questions and comments.
Thank you so much, sir, for the insightful session. If there are any questions, you can put them in the chat box. We can now have a look at them. In the meanwhile, while everyone types, can I ask a question myself, sir?
Sure, please.
So we went on to speak about emotions and how people's expressions can be used to tell a story, which directly connects me to another aspect, which is related to data, which is empathy. So I wanted to know your views on how data and empathy relate to each other and how they both can be used to make a difference.
Actually, what do you mean empathy? Could you just elaborate on that?
So, sir, there was a certain discussion. We had our data visualization modules going on in the past few weeks, and there was a certain discussion that sparked up a lot of insights. A statistic of a number of child drownings in a particular area might just be there for a large period of time, but a news report or a picture of the same event could spark a much larger amount of chaos and a movement to make rectifications. So I wanted to ask you, how capable are data and empathy individually and together in inciting change?
Short answer, data sucks at it and empathy rocks at it in terms of getting people to drive change. Numbers, we don't get. For someone who doesn't understand cricket, if you said, this guy scored 336 runs in the last match. Okay, is that a lot? Is that small? Right. And somebody who's played cricket goes to a football match and says, what score is 2-1? What, guys, you don't play or what? Right? We score 200, 300, 400. So data by itself doesn't help. Context is what helps. So the most important thing when it comes to presenting data is context. So why not just go for context? Trouble is nobody believes just the context. I'll put in whatever context I want, right? So data is the anchor to reality. And if you go with pure data, they at least know that it's real. Well, you could always fake data, but that's easier to figure out. But a message is purely an interpretation. Context is purely an interpretation, and each person decides how they want to tell it. So in general, what I've found most effective in driving change is, one, if you're already clear on what kind of change you want to drive, find the most powerful data point for that, and then build a story around it. A lot of people find the most important data story point in one of two ways. Either they don't have data, or they have too much data. I did this analysis and this analysis and this analysis. Pick the most important one. The analysts invariably present only the data and not the story around it. The non-analysts invariably present just the story without necessarily the data. And that doesn't leave a credible output. But if I had to pick one, I'd pick the story over the data, because otherwise you don't really get anywhere. But there's one other thing that the data helps us with. See, if you're just relating a story or just a context, it's based on gut feel. It's basically saying, I think this is good. You may be right, you may be wrong. For someone who's interested in discovering whether they are right or wrong, data helps. So it's not just about driving change, but even figuring out whether to change and how to change, data can help. So gently, the way I put it is use data to figure out the direction to go in and build the story to actually get people to go in that direction. Any other questions? Okay, Asavari, that's an interesting name. Asavari, I haven't heard your name so far. Okay, it's amazing to see the Google Sheets reacting to humans at an emotional level. Never knew it could happen. Yeah, I didn't either until about a month ago when my team showed me. So devices could actually communicate to humans at an emotional level simply by visualizing data. Yeah, exactly. That's really it, right? What we have is the ability to put in a simple filter between data and the human psyche. Visuals are all it takes. It's really powerful. Well, I'm guessing that probably exhausts the bulk of the questions. If there are any, just feel free to reach out. My contact details are online. Thank you for your time, and I hope this was interesting and useful. Have a good day, folks.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir, for this insightful session. We today learned how data can be such a powerful force, how attributes of a shape such as color, text, outlines can be used to tell a story, as along with the emotions and expressions of individuals. Let us end the event with a few words from our director, Professor Manisha Phadke.
Hi, good evening, everybody. To answer the question which you put out in the beginning, why you in design school? So that's the reason why you were invited to a design school, to give the matter over the empathy. And I think more than the questions, I think a little, though we have modules and they've just finished modules in data visualization and data design, I think the fabric that made visualizations that they were envisaging is what you showed. And that probably was overwhelming. And I think it will seep into what they work, because nobody thought an Excel sheet could do what you explained. And that's the reason why I was urging you to talk here, because they go both in parallel. And another reason why is because I have a secret love affair with data for a very, very long time. I mean, IDC, when I was a student at IDC, and that time we didn't even have digital softwares to do that. So it's a circle complete there. And I think personally, my mind is actually vibrating with so many things you can do with a simple Excel sheet, and you don't need to code, and you don't need to use any other animation software to show how you want to visualize data. So thank you for that. And we look forward to having students work that now entice you instead of the other way around that you did today. So thank you again, Mr. Anand, and hope to see you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Manisha. Thanks, everyone. Bye.